Please welcome the panel. We've been in deep rehearsal all day for this. Actually, that's not true. The one thing I did say was, let's just have a good time while we have this discussion, yeah? That's what we're going to aim for. Terrific. So can I please ask you to go along the line, introduce yourself, and just introduce yourself with a particular perspective or something in this general theme that matters most to you, and then we'll open up to a discussion with the group. So.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Justine Roberts, and I am the founder and CEO of Mumsnet, which is a website for parents, and Grandsnet, which is a website for grandparents. Hands up, any Mumsnetters in the audience, just so I know whether I can tell any lies. There we are. Look, and there are a few men raise their hands. That's good. We have around 7 million visitors a month to our site. It's basically a community where parents can tap into each other's knowledge, mostly on things like whether their husband is indeed as feckless as they think they are. We have about 90 people working for us now, and I would say, without really knowing for sure, about 75 of those are female, and the other 15 are techs. So that's where my perspective is really. I'd love to make it more of a women's world, particularly around this area of technology and product development, and a discussion about how we can do that would be most welcome.
Terrific, thank you.
Cool. My name's Kate Jackson. I'm an ex-lawyer, and I've founded my first company in 2007, and I've since founded 2 more companies. One of those is called Table Crowd, which is a platform which supports business networking dinners for entrepreneurs and professionals. And I've also founded a company called Silk Thread, which is a marketplace for independent fashion brands. We're early stage startups, both of those, and we have around 10 people across both projects. Everyone that's in tech, on the tech side, our developers, designers are men, and people on the communication side in the business are generally women, which is the trend.
Hi, I'm Juliette Morgan. I'm head of property at Tech City. I'm allowed to be here because I'm a girl, and I'm also a mum to a 3.5-year-old. You're really bad. We'll just goad each other into telling you this by the end of the session. I'll say it now, shall I?
Yes, say it now.
Oh my God, this is going to hit Twitter. So we were just saying that it seems almost amazing that we should be having a conversation where 4 women get on stage, because the idea that 4 guys should get on stage, with the commonality being that they have a penis, and talk about the fact that they have barriers at work, it just feels extraordinary that we should even have to have this session. So I don't have the perspective of a tech startup, but I'm a woman working in the property industry, and so that's why I'm come.
I'm Adisa Tijani, and I'm head of ecosystem development here at Level 39. So I actually look after 140 startup companies that are in this amazing environment and ecosystem here at Level 39. Level 39 is owned by a property company, the Canary Wharf Group. So my perspective is coming from the fact that I look after all these entrepreneurs all the time, and they're actually growing here at Level 39. Some started with 1 desk, some now have offices of about 20 people. And from a women in tech's perspective, I guess the perspective I'm coming from is the getting into the industry. So the first 5 years of coming into our sector, what do the next set of employees that are going to work in these kind of spaces kind of expect from their employers?
Terrific, thank you. So one of the things I was struck by from Ian's presentation just now was that massive shift that he talked about, that very fast shift of companies getting into agile working, that 20% to 70%, all like in 1 year. Do you sense anything in this whole terms of diversity in the workplace? Is there anything moving it anywhere near that fast, or is this a slow change?
Okay, so can you just define what you mean by agile working for the
Well, I mean, I don't want you to talk about agile working, but that was just an example of something that is moving very fast in this area. Right. Companies getting good at agile working.
So I would say that at Level 39, the majority of the companies do working in an agile kind of way, because they are technology startups in fintech, retail tech and future cities tech.
Yeah.
And we do actually have women on the teams here at Level 39, and some of them are actually in technical roles. So I think things are adjusting, it's just taking a bit more time. And at the moment, some people prefer to work in the more creative environment of a startup company who might be based in an environment like Level 39 rather than being locked to their desk at a large corporation.
And just to follow on from that, I think there's some trends coming that we can't quite see yet, but I'm aware of space providers, developers who are trying to create co-working and kind of early stage studio type environments around childcare and creches, so that coming right back into the workplace, so that we take the distance out from kind of childcare and working. So that's coming.
I mean, Mumsnet was founded on the idea that we wanted a different type of work environment. I previously, before starting Mumsnet, had actually been a football and cricket reporter, and prior to that I'd worked in the investment bank in the City of London. And the only women who'd got to the top, as far as I could see, were women who pretended they didn't have a family. So they literally, I mean, I'm literally the head of the European Equity Department at Deutsche Bank, was a woman who was taking calls from her maternity bed after giving birth. She literally took client calls from, you know, there's the baby, okay, yes, can I help you buy those, sell those? And so I was determined to create an environment where people didn't have to pretend their families didn't exist, and indeed could admit that their families were the most important thing to them behind work. Work came second, because let's face it, really it does. If a crisis happens, work very much comes second. So that was at the forefront of what we did, and I persuaded my first people who came into the business that we would have every meeting in the jacuzzi at the local gym. And I remember saying that to her because she'd been a TV producer and she had kids, and she couldn't go back to that because she felt she would lose all the benefits of sort of work-life balance. So I said, okay, don't worry, you know, it's going to be this great. We're going to have every meeting in the jacuzzi. And we did try one meeting, and the papers got really soggy and it just didn't work. But I mean, so we've gone out. I mean, if you look at any ad we put out there, we say we are family friendly. Families come first. You never miss the school play. You never feel bad if your child's sick and you have to work from home. And as a result, we get a lot of flexibility, and we need that because we run forums that are open 24/7. So we give flexibility and we get flexibility. And the single biggest benefit is we get women who've had kids who would otherwise have left the workplace because they can't cope with that presenteeism when really they want to be at the school assembly or whatever. So acknowledging that as a core part of what we do really allows us to hire great talent and retain great talent. That's what we're all about.
Terrific.
I think from our side, I think we're much very early stage, and we provide as much flexibility as we can, but only within certain roles. So there's certain roles where we actually seek out mums at home because the role would suit them, and the tasks aren't time dependent, and they can fit them around their other commitments. But there's certain roles in a company where, I mean, we're much smaller than you, and everything's still a lot more up in the air and unpredictable, and things can be demanding, and that doesn't always suit women, so we find that women don't necessarily apply for those roles because of the unpredictability. And I think that's just the case if you're an early stage company. Once you become more established and everything's in its place and you know how things are going to operate and how things are going to work, you can put in kind of much more friendlier policies. But for now, we're the smaller task we can be, but on the bigger things, it's more difficult to work that way.
So in the, as I said, provocative title with the Women in Technology, is this a man's world? I mean, obviously the implication there is that it could well be a man's world, and so change is required. So the question I'd like to ask each of you is, where most do you think change needs to happen, and how do we bring that about?
So I think industry need to actively be involved in making this change. So from a Level 39 perspective, we actually have a coding course for young graduates, young women, which is part of Code First Girls. It's actually targeted at getting young women into the industry and making them know that this is an industry and an environment that actually works for them. And so I think supporting initiatives like that are sometimes the best things to do. We do also support Code Club, which is like for little ones, but we know they're not going to be in our industry for a bit more time. But I think it's also about opening up our doors to say, okay, this is what we're about. Every single week we have multiple tours from people around the world to know that this is an industry for you, and that the technology industry is a place that is open for people from all different types of backgrounds, and diverse teams apparently make better businesses. So it's good business sense to also do it as well.
I don't know, I don't think there's hundreds of women knocking at the door wanting to get into tech and they're being prevented from doing so. I do think that the opportunities are there and people have the information, and maybe women just aren't as interested.
So I strongly disagree,
Okay.
more because there are graduates at top universities here in the UK who are really smart, really would work well in our industry. Unless we as an industry let them know that this is an industry for them, they might not necessarily know. And all because we're in it day in and all the time, it means we feel that of course everybody knows about it, but we meet students from across the world and across the country who are like, oh, this is an industry for me. So we still do have a lot of work to do here in the UK to let people know that it's an industry, and even to let young women know this is an industry for you.
But they have the thing I don't always understand is they have the same information as guys at that university who are doing that same course. I think that these people women are educated. They do get to make these decisions, and they do have all this information available to them. And I think there's something which I suppose I'm allowed to say, like men and women are totally different. You know, the things they do, the things they like. You know, there's men's magazines, women's magazines. There's films. We like different things. We do different things, and that's definitely going to filter down to our work preferences. There's probably more women, I think, in like healthcare and education and those sectors. And I think that definitely all the information needs to be there, and it needs to be open, and it needs to be nothing restricting. But I don't know if that necessarily will result in all of a sudden a flood of women in tech, because I don't know if they would choose it still. I don't know. It's I'm not sure.
I wonder if there's a bit too much emphasis on coding per se, and not enough on all the creativity that goes into creating a tech product. So the thing I found hardest to recruit for is actually user experience, sort of design roles more than actual coders. And those strike me as taking on board your point that we have a different skill set. Often they're very female skills. They're often translation and communication skills. And I think the trouble is with, as it's advertised to kids in school, coding is all done by a geeky, maths type teacher. And they don't really emphasise creativity. It's part of the, it's part of the maths curriculum. I know in my kids' school, if you're good at maths, you're encouraged to code. Rather than it being part of the design creativity curriculum. And I think there's a lot that could be done to make it much more appealing, because actually those are the skills that I miss.
So programs like Apps for Good, they do, which is a program which is in schools across the UK. They actually do make sure that they look to work with the the DT, I think DT teachers or DT department, as well as the maths department, as well as the English.
But it should be the art department, is what I'm saying. The problem is DT again is, you go look at a DT GCSE classroom, it will be mostly boys. I think it's about creativity and social skills and all that kind of stuff, because my problem is I get these, lovely geeky boys who are a bit greasy in glasses and make these bits of code, but none of it actually can, you have to go and then spend a long time dealing with the language they've used, and they haven't really thought about how people are going to interact with it. So I think there is a whole skill set we could encourage, which is,
about being a problem solver.
Yeah, and being more of a communicator that plays more to perhaps female skills.
I just read an article about unicorns and super unicorns and how none of them have been founded by women founders. And you can ask the question, is that because investors won't invest in women? Did women not go forward with those ideas in the first place? And it's fascinating looking back at the kind of DNA and lineage of those companies, that it's guys who've been at school together being invested in by other guys.
Yes.
And I think technology, the technology thing, technology enables us to work from anywhere. So no one can tell whether I'm taking my son to school because I'm still on email or on a call, which makes me a terrible parent but a very good employee. And I think there's something around technology is liberating us to spend time with our families at the time we can be doing that. But actually this is cultural, this is about workplace and corporate culture. That there isn't the same expectation on men to be at the school play, to be home by 5 o'clock doing the school run and the bath time as there is on women.
Yes.
And so that, of course we can deal with technology and work in technology, but actually this needs to permeate through to culture around families and parenting, not just women's agendas.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. We surveyed Mumsnet users recently, and you know, essentially, working women take on, you know, roughly twice as many tasks in the home as working men, and in my case, it's about 15 times as many. And you know, then you wonder why they burn out or don't want to reach the top because they're just doing all this shit, basically. And you know, my view is that dads have to step up. But you're right, it's cultural. You know, no one would say you're a really bad father because Johnny only had a packet of crisps in his lunchbox. They would look at the mother, and that, you know, mothers feel all that guilt as well. But anyway, it's a whole nother subject. We can rant on for ages about that. But I think your point about finance is right. So just very brief, and I'll shut up. Anecdote about, you know, when we were a startup 15 years ago, you know, in internet years were kind of almost dead, I think, a bit like dog years. I remember some German guy, he had a community website who wanted to fund us, and it was right just before the dot-com crash, and I went along to see him, and he said, yes, I'm interested in your business, but just one thing, you will not be running it. So I had just started, and already I was supposed to resign. And because you have no experience, but you know, there was just, and obviously wanted a guy who'd had 1 year of experience to come and run this thing. And I thought, yeah, probably I'm just the wrong gender here, actually, is, you know, call me paranoid, but that's what I thought. And I think the problem is it's mostly men, investing in mostly men, yeah.
But some investors are very honest. So a very good friend of mine who started her own business went to see an investor, and he said, I really like it, but unfortunately you're a sole single founder and you're of childbearing age. End of conversation. Very, you know, put it out there. But for him, I understand as well the risk if he's to invest in her and that, you know, she was to go and have a family, then who's running her business because she's on her own. So I do see that perspective, but there's people starting to be more honest.
But it was called Mum's Day. I mean, you know, there was an advantage to being a mum.
Yeah, definitely, in that case, yeah.
But I was at a dinner last night, and the same conversation came about investing in companies that are led by women, and actually the key thing is invested in companies that have great products, and that's the key thing. And if you enable more people to realize that actually it doesn't matter if I'm a man or woman, if I've got a great product, it's going to succeed. And one of the people there was talking about crowdfunding, how when you're doing a crowdfunding campaign, people don't necessarily scroll down to the bottom and see who are the founders, are they men or women? They just fund a campaign because of actually what they think the product will actually do. So I do think the investor community in the UK is slightly different to the investor community in other places around the world. But I do think they know that there is a slight issue. But I'm conscious that we're veering off topic. Or
are we?
Are we okay?
I didn't realise we had.
But for us at Level 39, we do work with investors every day, and the thing that it comes down to is it a great product, and are you a great team or founder that actually can take this to the next level, and that's the critical thing. But every day I do hear from women who are like, oh, actually I was told you need a young white male to front your company.
But I don't think anyone wants to get invested in because they're female. No one wants kind of special measures because we have ovaries.
It's because you've got an amazing product.
Exactly.
But we were talking earlier, weren't we, about there is actually a marketing advantage to being female because you are slightly unusual. So you were telling me an example of, you know, Downing Street finding out about you and then sort of parachuting you in the next day.
Yeah, we did. We crowdfunded one of our projects, and my co-founder is also female, and she's the face of the business, and we successfully crowdfunded it. And within a week, we were in like broadsheets, magazines, we were at 10 Downing Street, we were everywhere because they wanted to champion this company that was run by women. I couldn't believe it, successfully crowdfunded. And so there are actually advantages, and you're more memorable as well when we do pitch events, or that quite often you're the only female-led company pitching, so people remember you. I actually did a big event where there was 25 men and just me, and it was all you breaking out into groups, and there was a really, really great VC there, and following up, I just followed up with him and said, I was the only girl there, I'd like to meet you. And he obviously remembered exactly who I was, and I got a meeting straight away. Now that would have been connected to what I was doing, but I imagine the other 25 guys also emailed him. Now how many of them he could actually remember, I don't know. So, there are definitely advantages for women in tech, that there's not that many women in tech.
Terrific. So let's open up to a dialogue with the audience. Are there any questions or thoughts or comments or contributions to this debate? Women in technology, is this a man's world? Is that true for you? Here is a microphone coming right now. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I have a question, and first of all, this is I think it's brave to take that subject up and kind of discuss it. It's actually a really interesting issue, and my question would be, is this only a women's issue? Because I can't, you're only women in the panel, for instance. So, what do you think about that? It's are we missing, a perspective in this? So, is it only women that see this? Just some thoughts about that.
I think that it's a business issue, right? You want to make sure that as many people as possible are utilizing their productivity in order to do what they need to do, and it is not just a women's issue. For some things, there are some things women are going to understand. So if you had a women's roundtable about female founders, there are some things that are going to be shared there that other people would not understand. But if you do not engage the other half of society, it's going to be a slight problem. So maybe next year there'll be a young man or an older gentleman here on the panel with us as well, because it's as important to actually engage men in this conversation, because actually it's the man who will think, oh, you know what, maybe I will take the burden of certain tasks so that their wife doesn't have to do it and they can work that extra few hours.
Adiz's right that it's about diversity. I was in a diversity conversation, albeit not with a tech company, recently, and it was item 14 on the agenda, diversity. And they turned to me and said, so, Juliet, women's issues. Tell me now. So there's no ethnic diversity, there's no disability diversity, there's no age diversity. Let's just start with men and women. And it's interesting because my husband's starting a company at the moment and he's 50. And he's experiencing ageism. And that's sort of extraordinary that we've got to stop judging people based on their gender, their age, their disability. It is just about what's good for business and is it the right product, and frankly, get over it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think, I'm not a massive believer in the kind of artificial segregation of women in tech. So there'll be events just for women in tech, and this event is just for women. And of course, you're missing most of the people in that industry by doing that. Certainly, if you want to meet investors, you're not going to meet any because there's a tiny percentage. So I don't think segregation for the sake of it is necessarily a good idea. The only possible advantage I can see is that it supports the less confident and more shy women who sometimes do only go to those events because they're more comfortable there. And those events are a lot friendlier and a lot more comfortable. When I go to them, I find them a lot more relaxing and a lot more comfortable. But ultimately, you're only meeting a tiny portion of who you need to meet. So,
Justine, anything for you?
I don't really have anything else to say other than, one could spend one's whole life going to women's events and being on women's power lists, which seems to me once you're on one, you're on them all. I feel very conflicted about whether they're a good or a bad thing, really. Well, I don't think they're a bad thing, but whether they're a good or a useful thing, or whether they're just, we're just sort of siloing ourselves.
And I think that's a really important point, that there's a danger in it becoming your corporate identity,
Yes.
that you become the token person who you'd actually like to just be good at your job and rewarded for your job, not because of your gender.
Terrific. We have one more question or comment. The microphone is on its way.
Great. I think that I was thinking about this word technology, and I think nowadays it covers so many different aspects of our economy. And I completely agree that there's this sort of cliche of coding, but there's so many more parts to this. And I do think there's a complete misalignment between what people are being educated in of any sex, of either sex, and what the world needs. So there's a kind of, feels to me like there's an inevitable trend towards an egalitarian, uniform. I mean, my own daughters who are now grown up, I think they didn't see any difference for themselves coming into the workplace in this. And it just also struck me that there are plenty of places in the world where having a group of women talking to an audience is illegal, unacceptable. We live in a country where that doesn't exist, and we take that for granted. But there probably wasn't a time, so the kind of tide is with this conversation, I think.
Any thoughts?
So there's a really interesting book by Reid Hoffman called The Startup of You, which actually talks about the change of the workplace and the change of careers and things like that. And it is changing. We don't know if in 40 years' time or 50 years' time the jobs that are common now will be common then. And I think in order to be ready for that kind of environment and that kind of space, we need to resource our young people, resource our population with the skills that will actually carry them forward to be the problem solvers, and to also be people that can keep going even if things are shifting and changing, and being able to deal with that shift and change should become more normal. There is no longer that corporate ladder in many environments. That corporate ladder is changing, and that the Reid Hoffman's book actually goes into that really well. And I think it comes on to a point about things like LinkedIn and how people present themselves. That's so important going forward for our future, because who doesn't Google a candidate when they are applying for a role or things like that? So that's my only point on that.
I agree with that completely. I think it's all about having people who are, you want someone who's diligent, who's a problem solver, who's creative, rather than someone who's got, I don't know, GCSE Spanish, or, you want individuals, and Google highlight this, don't they? They hire creative individuals rather than people who've gone through a coding course, because they think they can teach that better themselves than any university. I completely agree with you.
I think there's going to be a massive time lag, so any changes now you start to see at school level. I know when I was at school, I had the option of textiles, home ec or shorthand. I think shorthand's higher than I could do. But had there been technology, I don't think I would have chosen it anyway. So I think also there's the level of the parents' influence on the choices that children will make at the age where they're not necessarily able to totally make those choices themselves. So even if they're there, it's not just about the children choosing them, it's about the parents who possibly don't have the knowledge to know they're the best thing for them to do as well, being educated to know that that's a good choice. But it's definitely a long time lag before those kids get to the point of being involved, I suppose.
Yeah, I remember now what I wanted to say. I think this could almost be entitled, you could have this conversation about entrepreneurs, because I think the problem with men and women is they are taught very early on girls and boys, a different attitude to risk. And I think that's almost the single biggest reason why there are fewer women in tech, because there are all these tech startups. And if you ask a bunch of women who start a business whether they're entrepreneurs or not, 90% will say no, they're not. You ask a bunch of men, 90% will say yes, I'm an entrepreneur. Just because they've had the thought that they're going to start a business, they're an entrepreneur. Women are, oh no, I'm not, because that sounds a bit risky. I'm just doing something from my kitchen table. And I squarely fell into that category too. I still, slightly come out in hives of people say, well, you're an entrepreneur, to startups. Well, no, I just, sat around at my kitchen table and started something. So I think it is all about the way girls and boys view risk and their risk-taking, and how we encourage boys to go out there and take risks and be dangerous, and the girls should be a bit more cautious. And I think that is subliminal. It's part of the way we bring our kids up, and we ought to think about it, because the result is, I think there are fewer women who are prepared to say, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm going to take a risk and I'm going to borrow money and do something great, because they don't want to let anyone down or get it wrong or step out of line.
I think that's really
Totally
important.
agree.
That in our cultural and social DNA is the fact that we won't let the kids go hungry. So there's the fact that the guys are totally committed, but I think show a woman who might lose everything and her kids might go hungry, and she will bite down and she will fight tooth and nail for that business. So there's probably as much reason to invest in a mum or a female entrepreneur on the basis that we take responsibility, we multitask, and we will make sure that those kids are fed. So
The stats also say that women deliver better returns when they are invested in as well. Yeah, they do, yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Any more thoughts, comments from the audience? Yes, gentleman at the back there. On its way. Oh.
It's got to be pressure.
We are on the edge of our seats with anticipation for your question, sir.
That'd be good.
We're ready.
Hope I can live up to it. I was just picking up on, I think it was a previous question, and also what Justine, you said about creativity. I guess it was an observation that in the education system, I don't think we teach creativity very well. And just picking up on the points below, what are the things that you think the education system can do to kind of help not just boys and girls, but kind of all kind of ages to be either more risk-taking or more kind of creative, so that we're creating that kind of next generation of people that actually want to be entrepreneurs or wanted to go to business. Just wanted your thoughts on that aspect of the education system.
So my point on this is the education system shouldn't stop at the doors of the university or the school or things like that. The education ecosystem is actually everywhere. From the media that you read and you actually hear, oh right, this is an amazing, like Karen Brady, for example, is an amazing businesswoman who's doing great stuff, and her being in the newspaper can actually help educate a young woman or a young guy. Actually, you know what? I can be entrepreneur, I can be on the board of a football club in my 20s and things like that. So I think that sometimes we say, okay, it's the education system has to deal with this, but actually it's wider than that. So the learning doesn't stop when you finish school. Learning continues in the workplace, from friends and family and the like. So it needs to be part of our culture overall. So from the fact that there's now a film about Alan Turing and him discovering code and things like that in the World War, is actually a movie about tech, but people aren't really seeing it like that. But actually, that's a movie that will actually allow people to realise, oh, once upon a time there was an amazing code breaker more than 70 years ago who was actually doing awesome things, and that is still education. So I sometimes think that we do blame the education, traditional education, oh right, it's your job, you have to do it, oh teachers and universities, why are you not doing stuff? But actually we're doing this every day, so we also need to allow the media, our companies, ourselves to actually champion it every day. So it doesn't need to stop in the confines of a lecture room or classroom. That's my view on it.
Picking up on that, there's a school of thought that says in order to have creativity, you have to have absolute boredom. And we don't make our children bored. We don't take electronic devices.
Too much tech in their lives.
Yeah, they'll play with an iPad before they get bored enough to actually go and find their creativity. So, and it is going back to that kind of old-fashioned, frankly painful parenting, where you have to go through the pain barrier of mummy, I'm bored, and not hand over the device or the TV and give them the tools to go and create something and set that culture really early on. I heard a stat last week that said the biggest barrier to innovation in this country and a notional skills gap is that adults, parents want their offspring to have a safe job, to gear their education and their life chances into coming out with a profession. So we culturally, as a generation, are not bringing up children with the skill set and risk profile that enable them to go start something.
I think some great role models, as there's more and more really successful companies in the UK and people see entrepreneurs going from start to finish. I think that role models will automatically inspire the people coming through. And also, I was talking to a friend who works with kind of school leaver age, and he says that he does get the vibe of entrepreneurship because they all watch Dragon's Den and actually think, oh, I've got a great idea, I'm going to raise some money, I'm going to do this thing. So he seems that he's seen a change in terms of people being a little bit more inspired by what's going on. About 16-year-old these kids are, so.
Yeah, I think it's all about learning about failure, really. I think the system is, and the way GCSEs have got easier and easier, and we basically put it on a plate. And you can actually buy a revision chemistry book that basically in that much will, if you swat every bit of that, you will get an A star in your chemistry GCSE. And I think the curriculum is a bit crap, really. It doesn't cater. I mean, I think A level's probably slightly different, but actually what people need to learn to do if they're going to be entrepreneurial is learn to have the confidence to fail or meet a problem and find a solution, and not sort of be wiped out by it. And I don't think we allow our kids to fail enough, and try things, particularly girls who are, I think in an environment of with men are scared to stick their neck out, and I think they should be encouraged to take risks and to fail and to, realise that's not the end of the world. And whatever the curriculum could do to allow that would be good for all of us, really.
Beautiful, thank you. I think there was just time for one more question. Yes? Here comes the microphone. And then we'll begin to wrap this up. Thank you.
It's actually more a comment than a question, if I may.
Okay.
I've read something about culture where they said the culture of a place is determined by the behaviour of the most powerful person in the room. And I think very much of what has been said for me is about leadership. So the role model, the idea of the ecosystem that we actually all kind of are examples and that we all teach. And I've once seen Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, being at a conference, and she gave a keynote and then left because it was Sunday, and she was being excused by the conference organizer. Oh, Mrs. Merkel has to leave because she's got another appointment. And she actually turned around and said, actually, no, I am going home. I am going to meet my husband. I have a life. And work in the office resumes at Monday morning. And I thought that was very powerful. If we had more people in those powerful positions actually speaking up and actually saying there's more to life than just work, and who actually manage to combine work and life and family and all of that, I think we'd be much further down the line.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And for me, as we begin to wrap this up, and then I'll ask for any final comments you might want to make, but for me this is about diversity, and diversity not just in terms of who's got the ovaries and who doesn't, but in terms of our thinking. I was telling Adiza when I met her this afternoon, this conversation prompted a memory of going to a conference in America years ago, and the American MC was very proud of the fact that we were a diverse audience. And what he meant by that was that 60% of them were from America, and 40% from Europe. They'd flown in from Europe. The fact of the matter is 98% of us were white, and 95% of us were male, and probably most of us went to very good universities. And in terms of diversity of thinking and perspective and different risk profiles and this, that, the other, which creates amazing products and amazing brands and great companies to work in, that's what matters. And how can we get, and we've heard so much today about collaboration. But if we're all collaborating across space and time on these wonderful technologies, but all thinking the same thing, that ain't collaboration. It's just talking together a lot. So. But to wrap it up, any final thoughts from the panel?
I really liked what you said. I completely agree. And what I really want to see, and I keep banging on every time I get let anywhere near anyone in power, is that I'd like to see men in the cabinet do a job share. I'd like to see men step up and say, no, my family's important, and because actually then it would make it much easier for women. I'll very quickly tell you a story about Eamon Holmes, who was a TV presenter, breakfast TV presenter, and Fiona Phillips. Fiona Phillips was on the sofa with him. She'd asked for months and months and months could she go 4 days a week? Her family life was falling apart. She needed this, and literally 15 months later, they were still saying no, it's a 5-day-a-week job. Until Eamon asked. And Eamon asked to go 4 days a week, and then she was allowed to go 4 days a week almost immediately. And so often we need leadership, but not just from Angela Merkel. We need it from David Cameron as well.
Totally agree. Nothing major to add. I think that the main thing for me is that I think the change needs to start in schools at a young age, to give people the opportunities, the education and stuff, and make sure they've got the right skills when they come out to be involved in the fastest growing companies, which are generally technology companies.
My only one is just be authentic. If you need to do a school run, do a school run. No one's going to die. That call can happen later, and you'll never get that time back.
I think from my perspective, it's about encouraging the learning, that actually you never stop learning, and as a woman in technology, you can do as amazing a job as a man in technology. It's just, oh right, I happen to be a woman. And women are amazing assets to companies as well, and diversity increases productivity and makes good business sense. So it's all going to, it's commercially, it makes sense. So it's almost like, why are we not doing it?
Yeah, terrific. Well, that's wonderful. Adiza, Juliet, Kate, and Justine, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, please a nice warm thank you.